A heartfelt welcome to today's episode of Humanities Dialogue, presented by DEIpeople.com. We're so excited to have you join us for this dialogue. Hosted by Quincy and DEI leader, activist, and disruptor, and Daniella Fairbairn, author of Insanely Great Customer Service, and the podcast host of Be Insanely Great. Let's have a real humanities dialogue together. Now, beloveds, let's dive into today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Humanity Dialogues presented by DEIpeople.com, hashtag DEIpeople on Instagram at official DEIpeople.com. Welcome back to every one of our listeners. Today, we're going to be talking about the color of opportunity. And I'm your host, Quincy and cisgender male, husband, friend, entrepreneur, DEI leader, joined by my wonderful and fabulous co-host, Daniella
Fairbairn. So I am Daniella Fairbairn. I am a wife. I am a community advocate. I'm a leader, and I'm also an author of Be Insanely Great Customer Service. I am creating a world filled with culturally competent leaders who are authentic, who are empathetic, and who are passionate about what they do. So I am so happy to be here, Quincy.
I want everybody to understand, Daniella always undersells. Please purchase her book. It's all about customer service, and it's a treasure because you are a thought leader in this space, and got to give you your flowers.
Thank you.
So today we're going to be talking about the opportunity or the color of opportunity within the United States of America. And again, to the audience, this is specifically for Americana.
Yes.
And the centering of whiteness in everything that we do. Now, a little background, a little history to this. Please understand, as you think about our society as a whole, the structure of whiteness is center in everything that we do. The images that we look at, advertising, housing, healthcare, etc., etc., etc. With that in mind, we have just witnessed an assimilation of our Hispanic community moving towards whiteness. I do not believe it was intentional, but I think it is systematic, in which in America we have value tied towards whiteness, whether it be wealth, generational wealth, as well as a lot of benefits for being white. And so we want to deep dive and have a frank conversation about just the color of opportunity within the United States. First of all, what jumps into your mind when you think about opportunity and Americana?
I do think when I think of Americana, I think of white. I don't know why. Yeah. I don't think that should be my first thought, but that's what it is. Yep. When you are, and it brings me back to saying that we are the minority. It even starts from there, right? So, other than white, it's called a minority. When in fact, is that really true, right? So, is white the majority? No. But white may be the majority of decision makers, right? Yeah. People who are in authority, who are overseeing what needs to happen. It doesn't make it right, but white is seen as right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there must be a benchmarking of whiteness within our society. For many years, it is seen as a majority. But are we going community by community? No. Because in certain communities, white is a minority, but we're looking at it as a collective.
Yes.
And also when you think about how are you counting the whiteness, right? When you just look at all of our forms within the United States when it comes to race, you only have one option for white. So if you're not African American, if you're not Pacific Islander, if you're not Asian, and if you're not comfortable with the other box, then you check white. So a lot of Hispanics, majority of them, will check the white box. If you're Arab, you're checking the white box. If you're Spaniard,
Yes.
you're Italian with olive skin, kissed by the sun.
No.
You're checking the box, right? And
Yes.
then, systematic thoughts and structures, you get to choose ethnicity, which is two options. Either you're Hispanic or non-Hispanic. Now, most of us know if you're talking about a Hispanic person, they're coming from a country that speaks Spanish or, based on the demographics, have some sort of ties to a Hispanic heritage. And so with that, you're going all the way down South America. You're coming up to certain parts of Central America. And so that person, some of them are in the Caribbean. But not all countries within the Caribbean are seen as a Hispanic country or person that comes from a Hispanic heritage. It's a culture. And when you think about that, there's so many different versions of being Hispanic.
Yes.
And you will see a lot of that, some of those internal struggles and conflicts within those communities. The Puerto Ricans see themselves as real different from
The Dominicans.
the Dominicans,
Right.
And so the question is, it's much more multi-layered than just Hispanic or non-Hispanic. But that question, we all know the root of it is to see if you're European white or if you are Hispanic white.
Right.
Because whiteness is not just your skin color, right? Because there are privileges that come along with that within America, but we all know in the white experience, it's really European white you're really talking about. You do not want to hear about a white person from South Africa or a Caucasian person born in Kenya. And I could go on and on, right?
Yes,
You're
yes.
really, really focused on a European or Eurocentric person, Caucasian person. That's really what in America and in the American experience is really about. So with that being said,
Yes.
what do you think about the Hispanics that are assimilating to the whiteness or the white experience within the United States? Because it was quite clear from our
Right.
last election, that they are assimilating.
I'm torn because if I were perhaps in their shoes,
Yeah.
and I know that in being associated with whiteness, there comes privilege, opportunity that I would not have should I not, be associated with. Then it's like, okay, well, let me just kind of jump on the bandwagon because that is where opportunity lies as opposed to not, right?
Yeah.
And so do you really blame someone for doing that,
Jumping into my brain right now is the movie Passing.
Okay.
It's a black and white movie.
On Netflix, yeah?
I'm not so
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
Netflix, we need a sponsor.
Yes.
But it's about a person that she was fair enough to pass.
Yes. Yes.
And she had a baby.
Yes.
And she was like, really torn
Yeah.
during the pregnancy
Right.
because she's living in a white neighborhood
Right. With a white husband.
with a white husband. You saw the movie?
Yes.
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 Wonderful actress.
Yes.
I love her. I don't know her name. But anyway, so she is passing.
Yes.
And I'm immediately thinking, if you're going to get a better standard of living, why wouldn't somebody take the privilege
Yes.
of passing
Right.
to get those privileges?
But isn't it also a denial of who you really are, though?
Yeah.
That's conflicting, right? And so you then have to choose always on that side
Yeah.
of town on those decisions, and so being scared that someone would recognize you in passing.
As she
because that
did in the movie.
Yes, exactly.
As she did in the movie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it also has other people feel as if they have to feed into the lie.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you have to deny your family, your friends, your loved ones. And it's just, uncomfortable.
That is why the conversations that we're having, the DEI conversation that we're having, is so important, because the only reason, right, that somebody will say to themselves and deny an entire part of their being, right, because it took a black mom
Yes.
and a white dad in her situation, so she is denying
Yes.
the truth of her mom, right? So as to assimilate with her dad to get the benefits. The only reason we're having the conversation is because it is tied to resources.
Yeah.
And I am not going to say to anybody, right, don't get the resources for you and your family.
Right.
If it'll be better schools, a better place to live, better housing, health equity.
Right.
We all know that social determinants of health is really tied to the way you're living and where you're living. Sometimes it's down to your zip code. The violence within your community, or your community is policed or under-policed or not policed at all. The way you feel about yourself.
Right.
Right? The stresses. There's so many studies about the stresses
Yes.
of just slavery being carried on. I, as an immigrant, have never had a conversation about police brutality. My mom has never because I didn't grow up here.
So you never got the talk.
So that burden,
Yeah.
that burden of that, I have
Right.
never carried. All I can do is empathize. But the fact that we have to have that conversation
Yes.
is to demonstrate there is value, there is tangible, real world value of being white within the United States.
And so when I say the talk, I'm referring to parents talking to their children about being extra careful and mindful and aware of their surroundings when they're interacting with officers.
Yeah.
Because you have to be.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by the talk. And so Quincy has never had that talk. And it's something that I thought was pretty clear early on with stop and frisk.
Yeah.
If you're a New Yorker or know of what happened there, in that people were being pulled aside, walking casually, but because of stop and frisk, they were able to be frisked,
Yeah.
right? Without having any grounds. And that would just be a point of contention for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I'm glad when that no longer was the case in New York.
And New York is a state that is priding themselves on being diverse, being inclusive, and they had that policy,
Yes.
which only affected Black and brown people
Communities,
within their
right,
community.
right.
Because I've been to New York, I've lived in Brooklyn, and when I go to Manhattan, there's the same amount of bad behavior going on. I smell weed, and
Right.
I smell weed on the road,
Right, right.
and it's like there's no police there. But when I'm in
Yes.
Brooklyn,
Yes. It's heavy.
it's like it's a heavily policed community, and it's under the disguise that community has more crime. But I think if you put the same amount of resources to Manhattan, you will have the same amount of arrests.
Right. If
Yeah.
you're looking for something, you will find something.
Yeah. Especially for those communities.
Yes.
Going back to just the value tied to whiteness, we have an opportunity as leaders, when we see it, to speak up. Have you had an experience where you have spoken up on this topic and gotten a little spicy?
We'll be right back after this short break. Stay tuned. There's so much more to come here on Humanities Dialogue. Beloveds, welcome back to Humanities Dialogue. Now back to the show.
Yes. Definitely had that conversation in the workplace. And it made people very uncomfortable. And
Of
you
course.
can tell, very emotional.
Of course.
But it had to be said. And I think for far too long we ignore things, and it's to the point where some people believe it never existed. There was never an issue at that particular workplace because they thought that everything was peachy creamy for them,
Yeah.
right? Being the majority. But when you are part of the minority in the workplace and you experience certain microaggressions,
Yeah.
it is it's very uncomfortable. And so when you feel as if you can confide in someone who looks like you and you share their experiences, because more than likely it's relatable,
Yes.
it should be brought to the forefront. And although it was discussed, I never did move forward with it just because I felt it was just too heavy of a conversation.
Yeah.
And when people aren't used to a heavy conversation, you have to sometimes back away. Everything that comes up doesn't have to be addressed,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Everything's not
Yeah.
worth the battle. Sometimes you just have to kind of like push through and see what could be done. But it definitely has happened in the workplace. I do think that, perfect example,
Yeah.
I'm in the workplace and I'm talking to a new colleague
Yeah.
and I'm talking to her about our clients
Mm-hmm.
and I'm giving some details on them.
Yes. Yes.
And she assumed, she's like, oh, are you the social worker? So I said, no. And so like I want to hear the guess again because I'm like, okay, right? And so I said, well,
She wants to know if you're the boss.
right.
Yeah.
So I then said,
Yeah.
well, you know, I run the facility. She's like, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But I'm here talking to you about what's happening, right? And so if I'm giving such detail and I'm sharing such insight, why would you think I would not be someone, right?
Yeah.
Another example, another workplace where I'm interacting with the clients and the client didn't see me as being every day talking to this person every day.
Yeah.
Introduced myself when I first got
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And she assumed that my white colleague, who was actually my secretary,
Wow.
was the boss. And she's like,
Yeah.
well, I want to talk to the boss. And I said, what do you mean? I'm confused, right?
Yeah.
I'm confused,
Yeah.
Quincy. So
You knew exactly in your heart, but
Right.
you were like, yeah, come on,
right,
lady. Come
right,
on.
right. So she
Yeah.
said, I want to talk to the white lady. And I said, well, why would you? She's a secretary. Right? So she's my secretary.
Yeah.
Right? And I had to really give it to her because I'm
Yes.
like, what do you mean? Right? So there's an assumption that those in authority look a certain way and that those who look like me are in a different role.
Yeah.
And there's conversations as well, even just outside of the workplace, just assuming that in talking to someone over the phone, oh, you know, I thought you were a white woman, but why?
Yeah.
Why? Why was that assumption?
You know, that always is interesting to me because when somebody says, you know, you sound white, or you're carrying yourself as a white person, or, you know, this association with smarts, being articulate, sometimes calm, right? Calm is associated with being white. As somebody that has come into this country as an immigrant,
Right.
I am saying, how can you expect,
Right.
right, somebody that is maybe 2 to 3 generations removed from slavery, where it was intentionally done to not have that person learn to read, not have that person know how to communicate, the expectation and the assimilation in your brain that because I was given as a white person the opportunity to read and write, I can form a sentence in a specific way. And so that now in turn equals whiteness. Because it is borderline insanity to think that because a group of people have learned a certain way of speaking or learned a certain academics and intentionally kept another group of their same society from doing that, then assimilating or thinking or creating a mental structure that you, as a member of a white part of society, only speaks that way. When it's really tied to the resources that you were given.
Right.
Because when it comes to illiteracy, it has no race.
Right.
I can go in several parts of this country and I bet I can find the same amount of people that did not, and I'm talking present day, did not take the free education that was given. It is not tied to race. But again, there is this concept that whiteness speaks and carries themselves a certain way. Now, I do have a different opinion on anger.
Okay.
Because a lot of native-born African Americans carry a struggle, carry a stress that is generational. And especially today, the African American community, the patience is very small, especially for the nonsense, right? Especially when you're not giving me a resource
Yes.
that everybody is getting. And yes, a lot of African Americans have not had generations of calmness and security of having enough money, basic rights. So yes, they are going to be louder because
They
you
had
know,
to fight.
you had to fight.
That's a fight.
You had to fight. And I would ask any of my white colleagues and allies, the Italians had to fight when they came. Anybody that has come to this country had to fight. But the minute you start to simulate to the majority, you don't have to fight anymore. And that struggle, I just saw this movie about this nun, Calabri. Anyway,
I haven't seen, but yes.
she is a nun that she came from, I think is Italy.
Okay.
So she came to the slums of New York and she opened an orphanage, which was on, I
Oh,
think,
real life story.
it's a real life story,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
I'm looking at this movie and I'm like, these people treating these white people terribly, right? Because they were all Italian.
Okay.
And this is Italian slums in a certain part of Brooklyn. I think it's Bed-Stuy.
Okay.
It's Bed-Stuy. The slums, no resources. They didn't have any fire emergency systems. They have nothing. So they had this one little orphanage in which the kids lived like in the sewers almost. All the kids lived there, and she came, and she had to fight. So eventually, they gave her a house on I think it's one of the islands. I can't remember, but anyway, she had no toilet, no running water. They refused to give her all that. She had to dig her own well on the island. Really good movie. Please check it out.
Yeah.
And so what it demonstrated to me was even at that time, because they were the ones coming in.
Yes.
So whoever was there before, they were like, well, this belonged to us.
Yes.
Now in 2024, you can't tell the Italians in Staten Island nothing.
Okay.
They behave like if they need to watch the movie and see how they have assimilated and taken on all the privileges of whiteness now. And so that's why we're talking about just the wealth associated, the
Right.
opportunities associated with. If you're going to take it, right, and this is to the adults, if you're going to take it and understand then that you are partaking in a system, so that when it comes to your voting, when it comes to your communities, when it comes to, banning books, on Staten Island, they were banning this book, Black Panther. And I'm like, what is going on?
Right.
That is a good book.
Where there is knowledge, there is power. Right.
So
Right.
you must understand and take account and be responsible that if you're taking the opportunity, take it and fully understand you're taking it so that when you go home, you don't feel any elevated supremacy within your heart. It's just like, hey, this is the system, but my children, please understand we're equal. We're equal humans within this community. What are we going to do for our poor? What are we going to do for our unhoused? What are we going to do for whatever is within your community? So again, going back to just the opportunity that is tied towards just whiteness, we must be accountable for our decisions and what we're wanting to do within our communities. You know,
Resources.
and resources on the whole,
Yes. Yes.
housing, health. You know, I'm always on health
Yes.
equity because that's a major disparity within our society. The unhoused population, the mental health. We have disabled people.
Yes.
So many communities, so many groups of people that are being left out of the system systematically,
Yes.
and not because, there is poor people everywhere.
Of course. Of course.
There is poor people
regardless
everywhere.
of your background. Agreed. I'm thinking about, I know of a family member who said he has never experienced racism. When he said that, I paused for quite some time,
Yeah.
right? Because I know that being Black, being a man, there are experiences associated with that I would never experience as a Black woman.
Yeah.
So with him saying he has never experienced racism, I'm just wondering if that's because he is also an immigrant, right? And he had a different experience outside of the U.S. And so him coming here, he may not have paid attention to those moments
Yeah.
where there was something happening and just attribute to that person just being silly, right?
Yeah.
Or that person giving him a difficult time.
Yeah.
When in fact it was, right? So it's very subjective. And I just think that overall it's just being cognizant of what's happening around you and just creating a space where others feel welcome,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so there were times where I would talk to others and they would say, oh, when you work with a certain group of people, right? They're very exclusive.
Yeah.
They don't want you to be a part of what's happening. But I take a step back because I think about it. I'm like, wait, but when you think about it, this is a group of people
Yeah.
who have come to this country, whether it be in the 2000s or not, but they came
Yeah.
to the country. More than likely, more reason that you've been in the country, right? So they've come here and you're going to work and talk with people that you're comfortable with. Same language, similarities, mannerisms in what we do. And
Yeah.
so they're gravitating towards each other. There is strength in community. And so for them to want to band together doesn't make it a bad thing.
Yeah.
And so why are we looking at it as a bad thing? Why should they be separate? Why should they be divide and conquer? No, they are together because they're in a country that is not their homeland.
Yeah.
And they want to make sure that they're achieving the American dream. And so why not do it together? Why do we have to do it separately, right?
Yeah.
We are one people.
Yeah. I think we, as a culture, there's nothing wrong with community. It is seeing the diversity within each other and seeing the joy of, family is family regardless of, race.
Right.
Regardless of creed, regardless of class. It is the systematic problem of the concepts of white being superior to everybody else. And that's where the problem is. Because when you look at, the immigration policies within our country right now, right? There was a time when USCIS did not exist, right? You had some officers in, Roosevelt Island bringing in the masses, and you lined up and you just said your name, and you had to have somebody that lived here and an address.
And that was it.
That was it. There was no
Yeah.
visa. There was no overstaying your time. And then before that, there was nothing. You just showed up, right? And so this whole concept of, my family came here legally. There was no illegally,
It was
was no-
voluntarily or involuntarily.
You came if
It's like
you
you
had
got
the
here.
money and you got on the boat. I had an uncle that in the 50s or 40s came to the States. He just came. No, it took him just a couple weeks on a boat, and he got
Right.
here.
Right.
I think it's more than the 50s, maybe in the 40s. But again, this whole concept of systems that we have now, and then the oppressed people that are coming for opportunity, because, as you and I know, well, the United States is a wonderful place, but it's also a place that is advertised in a certain light.
Yes.
It is
A land of opportunity.
a land of opportunity. Nobody is saying when you get here, you'll be treated this way,
Yes.
right?
No one talks about that.
That is not in the ad,
Yes.
right? And so you get the concept of, hey, if I put my head down and I work really hard and I get here, I can provide for my family,
And achieve the American dream.
achieve the American dream. Then you get here,
Yes.
then you're like, oh, white people treat us like this. Or sometimes you don't even understand. And I'm a perfect example of it when I first went to Texas, because I've lived in Texas for several years. I remember going to the movies one day, and the guy came up to me and he said, hey, one of my laborers just fell off this roof. You want to work? And I was like, I'm sorry, because I was a little, first of all, I'm afraid of heights. And then I was like,
But I'm not skilled.
I didn't,
Yeah.
what? I was like, no, but thank you.
Yes.
My first days in the United States, did
Yes.
not know that was very racist, because he's looking at my color.
Right.
And is automatically thinking I'm a laborer or
Yes.
something.
Right.
I was working for a bank. I'm thinking the bee's knees of
Yes.
myself. But again, living in Texas, I saw it. A lot of times I did not know that I was being, these things were being said to me, because a lot of it was like, I tend to think of it as like if somebody was speaking French to me. I don't know French.
Yes.
So I'm looking for like body language and clues. And if those are, to a standard where I'm thinking the person is saying something nice, then it's okay.
Right.
They were calling me names, and they were, talking to me in a certain way. But I think I had enough emotional intelligence to understand, well, I don't really understand, so I don't have to take that on as a burden,
Right.
but it doesn't stop my
Right.
possibilities of producing or possibilities of doing something. And, I remember in Dallas when I first got my first apartment, I thinking back now, I have a very foreign sounding name. And more than likely that got me through. And then when I get on the phone, I'm sounding a little British a little bit. And so people are like, oh, but then I show up with the down payment, and I can imagine, they're like, what
Who
the?
is this?
So I kind of, but if they saw me first, more than likely, because I remember living in 2 apartments where I was the only person of color in that community, But again, I tend to lean into people. So I don't think they had an opportunity to say, treat me too badly, because I was the one, saying to the neighbor, hey, I see your door. You don't have a wreath out for Christmas. I'll make you one. And the old lady's like, oh, will you? Then I show her my skills, if anybody hasn't seen my Christmas. So I
Right.
think because of being naive and ignorant to those concepts, I'm able to kind of lean in. Like I've been pulled over and I have never, ever thought that I would die. And I've been pulled over and asked the cop, excuse me, because
Yes.
I'm in a hurry. Like,
Yes.
what are we doing? What's
Yes.
the problem?
Right. Right.
Not knowing the
That-
guy could grab me up.
Yes. And
You
that's
know.
it.
Yeah.
And
so
that's it.
a
Yeah.
part of that is
Yeah.
being naive and ignorant
Yes.
to the legacy now. It's a totally different as I've learned
Right.
a lot of the systems and structures. I'm not participating too much. Yes, officer, how can I
Yes.
help you?
Yes.
Is there a problem?
Right. Right.
My hands are on the steering wheel.
Yes.
We'll be right back after this short break. Stay tuned. There's so much more to come here on Humanities Dialogue. Don't forget to visit DEIpeople.com and follow us on Instagram at DEIPeopleOfficial for more insights and updates. See you in a moment, beloveds. Beloveds, thank you for supporting the brands and initiatives that make Humanities Dialogue possible. Now back to the show.
'Cause you're not going to drag me up.
Right.
Yeah.
Living in a predominantly white neighborhood, as an adult is really is an experience, right? And
Yeah.
so I was looking for a home in a quiet neighborhood, living in a a melting pot all of my
Yeah.
life, and wanted to live someplace quiet. And so
Did
found
you
a
think
place.
about race when you were looking?
No, I just
Okay.
thought about quiet
Quiet.
and a distance from work.
You want birds.
Yes, I don't mind the crickets. I
Yeah.
don't mind the crickets, right?
Birds and trees.
Okay, and that was it.
Yeah.
And it goes well with just who I am, just reserved, you know. And in doing so, it that meant a different type of neighborhood that you'd be living in, and I learned that. And so finding this place to live, and then now being the other, no longer the majority, but now being the minority within
Yeah.
that space, was really uncomfortable. Very, very
really?
uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable for me because I wasn't used to being the other, but I also noticed that I would get stares, and I didn't think that people were as warm, you know, and so it was very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know, very uncomfortable. I just think in general, just in life, change is inevitable.
Yeah.
And I do think that when there is an opportunity to advance yourself, you should.
Yeah.
I think so. I'm a firm believer in that. And so that may mean a change of resources for the better.
Yeah.
You know, and so it comes with some stuff too.
Yeah,
You know?
I think we must. The goal is not to say, assimilating is not a good thing, because if it's helping your family, you're making one step.
Yes.
But it is a conscious understanding that I am taking this
Yes.
poisoned apple, and I am taking a couple good bites before I
Yes.
put it back.
Yeah.
And that's the conversation I think a lot of people don't want to have, right? If I have a child, don't I want the best for that child?
Yes.
Right? Now, if it's in a specific community where the resources have been given, and I'm able to, wouldn't I? I heard an author talk about being intentional with her daughter as they moved into a community, if to send the daughter to the public school when she had the resources to send her to a private school. And I've thought about it in the sense of, each family is going to make a conscious effort for themselves. But she decided to send her daughter to the community school, fully knowing that she would have a very different experience because she would be at the top of that school because she was coming from a wealthier family. She had more resources, and if she was ever failing, there would be a tutor,
Yes.
right? And so she, in that conscious decision to put her in that school, was making a conscious effort to give her daughter a higher self-esteem and to understand the differences between the households within her community, and hopefully give her, a balanced outlook on life, right? And I say this to all the parents out there, there's no wrong or right here.
Yes.
You're doing your best.
Yes.
But I, as somebody that has been gone to a school or had private tutoring and so on, I don't know if I would make the same decision. If I have the resources to send my child to a private school or a public school, because I know what private tutoring does. And, it's a difficult, there's no right or wrong in it, but it's understanding you're within a structure, you're understanding that you're within a community and there's opportunities in certain things. And you're making that decision based on those opportunities. You're giving yourself some grace in understanding, I did take advantage of that. There are so many of Americans that took advantage of the GI Bill, right? You must then take account, say, hey, my granddad and my dad took, the GI Bill and we took it and we ran with it, right? Because we couldn't. Don't come back and say, well, my granddad is a hard worker. No, you took advantage of a privilege of color, and, it was given and you became a doctor.
Yes.
And you elevated your family that way. There's nothing wrong with that part, but there must be an understanding and accountability to it.
It takes work.
That's what I think. I
Yes.
think also especially for organizations that are working towards understanding the privileges that come along with whiteness, especially when you look at our C-suites, right? It's predominantly white, predominantly male. Let's take account of how we got here and then make some choices. Let's make some changes. Let's do some succession planning that invites. I know affirmative action is out of the door, right? But I say to Harvard, be broader in your recruiting measures. Go to not only Manhattan, but maybe take the best from the Bronx, the best from Brooklyn, the best from everywhere, and then make blind. I always love the Juilliard. Blind auditions. Put the curtain up. Put the curtain up. All I need to talk about is the music. If it's going to be color, then we're not listening to the music anymore. Right? If it's going to be your dad, you're not talking about the music anymore.
Right.
So go out into the community. If you really intentionally want to have a diverse population within your college or your workplace or whatever, understand the equity of it. It's not equal for everybody. All got different life journeys because of the resources that were given.
Yes.
But the equity is what's important. How are we as an organization, as a community, giving equitable access to everybody? Not everybody needed that $1,000
No.
a couple years back, right?
Right.
Not everybody needed that.
Right.
Right? I can't remember what I did with my $1,000.
Right.
But there's some families that needed more than that $1,000. I would have loved if you took my $1,000 and give somebody else from a certain area, a certain place, $2,000, because it will help them. I
Right.
didn't need it,
Right.
But
we have to also understand, Quincy, a lot of people don't think the way you do, right? And they're like, no, give me my 1,000.
Yeah,
Give me my, right?
sign that
Right?
check.
That
yeah?
is it. That is it. That is it. Yeah.
Anyway,
It's a mindset.
we're out of time again.
Oh, my goodness, Quincy.
Listen, call
can't
to
tell you.
action. If you're in a space that you understand your privileges,
Yes.
please extend those privileges to everyone that you can. You may not be able to do it for the world. Do it for the 5-10 people that you are in touch with within your organization. Do it for the 5 or 10 people within your world. And so with that, we're going to come to an end. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you for joining Humanity Dialogues here at dipeople.com. Again, #DIPeople. I thank you, my co-host,
Oh, thank you,
Daniella.
Quincy. Much appreciated. I want you all to be insanely great. And that's all I ask. #be insanely great.
Amen.
Amen.
All righty. Thank you all. See you soon.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
We have come to the end of today's episode of Humanities Dialogue, presented by DEIpeople.com. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Until next time, from your hosts, Quincy de Newnkirk and Daniella Fairbairn. Now, continue the dialogue on at DEIpeople.com and at DEIPeopleOfficial on Instagram. See you soon, beloveds.